This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. What's up, Wisecrack? Helen coming to you from my basement/recording studio/end of the world bunker. Today we're gonna chat about a film that'd make you swear you'd never put a ring on it. I'm talking, of course, about Gone Girl, the David Fincher flick written by and based on the novel by Gillian Flynn. We love this movie, but what's most striking about it, besides the shapeliness of Ben Affleck's chin, is its uniquely disturbing conclusions about romantic relationships. It's no wonder that Gone Girl is often defined mistakenly as a film whose thesis is all women are effin' bananas. But what if we told you that the real message is that your love life is all a bad theatrical production, that this is inevitable, and there's literally nothing you can do to stop it? Hear us out in this Wisecrack edition on Gone Girl. Love is a lie. And, of course, spoilers ahead. Before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's episode. A VPN is a virtual private network that encrypts your web traffic. With the VPN, you can protect yourself from hackers snooping on your traffic looking to get private information, like bank account pins or your many embarrassing Urban Dictionary searches. I'm trying to keep up with whatever's in nowadays too, so I get it. Surfshark has over 1,000 servers across the globe, and you can connect to it from your favorite device. This also includes their additional features, like Clean Web, which blocks ads and malware that may pop up while browsing, and Blind Search, which protects your browser from serving you targeted ads or sponsored sites. If you use the link in the description right now, you can get Surfshark VPN for 85% off its normal price, plus 3 extra months for free. Go to surfshark.deal/wisecrack or hit the link in the description. Protect yourself online and download Surfshark VPN today. And now, a recap. Meet Nick and Amy Dunn, a cool New York couple who, after getting laid off during the 2008 recession, moved to Missouri to care for Nick's ailing mother. Things kick off when Amy abruptly goes missing. All suspicions immediately fall on Nick because that chin.
It's quite villainous.
As the investigation progresses, things only look worse for him. Turns out he's been cheating on Amy, and also every clue basically screams this scumbag did it. Nick insists he's innocent, but nobody, not even the audience, believes him. That is, until we get the midpoint reveal. Amy is not only alive, but she plotted her entire disappearance to get back at Nick for his infidelity. You almost gotta respect the hustle. But when an in-hiding Amy gets robbed, she seeks solace in the clingy arms of her former sweetheart Desi. At his creepy lake house, they watch Nick on live TV as he apologizes and begs Amy to come home in a last-ditch attempt to avoid murder charges. Turns out, a successful media appearance is actually a huge turn-on for our girl. She responds to Nick's pleas by killing Desi and returning home, covered in his blood, claiming that Desi kidnapped and sexually assaulted her. Everyone feels very sorry for Amy because she is very convincing, very pretty, and, again, very much covered in blood. Except Nick knows the truth. Amy is a murderer. But she's his murderer, and he's in this toxic marriage for the long haul. The end. So, here's a question. Why stay with a woman who has a pathological tendency to ruin and or take the lives of her romantic partners? What is it that holds their bizarro love together?
I swear, you two are the most fucked up people I've ever known.
The answer lies in theater.
I'll play hot doting husband, sweet loving spouse.
Amy essentially lives her life as an actress playing the cool girl.
Nick loved a girl I was pretending to be. Cool girl.
Through Amy's eventual revisionist history, we learned that the chill persona she put on when she and Nick first met was a complete act. Amy sees herself as most romantically appealing when she's pretending to be someone she's not, specifically someone who likes getting bikini waxes.
I wax strip my raw.
Eventually, Nick too confesses to performing his initial cool guy self.
I met a woman who dazzled me, and I wanted her to love me. So I pretended to be better than I was.
He acts confident, funny, and able to keep up with Amy's banter. Fittingly, Nick writes for a men's magazine. Not only is he performing to attract Amy, but he's also teaching other men how to perform.
So you write for a men's magazine. God, does that make you an expert on being a man?
Appropriately, Nick's wedding proposal takes the form of an uncomfortable little show.
Challenge me. You surprise me. And fun fact for the readers, you have a world-class vagina.
Ugh, awkward. The cinematography even evokes a theatrical performance, with the unfortunate spectators framed like an audience. So what we have here is two people explicitly enamored with their lovers' acting skills. Everyone can relate to this. We've all tried to be a smarter, funnier version of ourselves to impress a romantic partner.
We were happy pretending to be other people. We were the happiest couple we knew.
But are these trivial lies, or something more sinister? The film seems to argue that, particularly for women, romantic expectations can potentially be extremely deforming to the human character. Amy describes the way she felt forced to contort herself into the cool girl to win Nick's love, and how it was both degrading and exhausting. It's obviously an old cliche that when you pretend to be someone you're not, you lose track of who you are. However, for Amy the cool girl, that phenomena seems magnified 20-fold. This magnification you'll see is part of a pattern, and that pattern ultimately separates Amy from the average woman who feigns interest in her boyfriend's craft beer tastes. But even the most practiced romantic performers can get a rude awakening from the real world. We see this when Nick and Amy get laid off in the Great Recession. It instantly impacts their romantic performances. They openly fret about who they might become.
Those wives who treat their men like dancing monkeys, to be trained and paraded.
Husbands who treat their wives like the highway patrol.
Then it turns out Amy's parents need to borrow back almost her entire trust fund.
My parents' publisher dropped them, and they're in debt up to their ears.
That's terrible.
And they need to borrow from my trust fund.
Thus proving their own fairy tale to be the marital equivalent of Firefest. Afterward, Nick basically gives up on being a husband and turns into a full-time gamer/shopaholic. This makes Amy occasionally act like the very not cool wife she dreaded becoming, nagging him about money as she cleans up after him. And then Nick's mom gets cancer, which means the already floundering Nick and Amy show has to relocate to Missouri. Amy feels lost, out of her element.
I feel like something he loaded by mistake.
You can't be a cool New York media gal when you're broke in Missouri. Fittingly, the couple rents a banal McMansion in a rundown town that was hit hard in 2008, leaving behind an empty neighborhood of bland homes now overrun by wildlife, as if to highlight the domestic ruin left in the wake of the recession. What's more, Amy struggles as a stay-at-home wife. In the book, Nick expressly tells the detectives that the couple fought over housekeeping. This suggests that she's failing at her role, and Nick isn't doing much better. He buys a depressing bar with Amy's remaining trust fund, but it's losing money, doubly undercutting his attempted performance as a competent breadwinner. The point is that neither of them is really able to convincingly perform a role that fits. So what's a guy like Nick to do when his cool guy facade is failing, and his marriage is too? Well, he finds a new romantic lead. Cue Andy, a younger cool girl, who is both more impressionable and less intimidating than Amy ever was. At this point, Nick stops attempting even the most half-hearted performance of his marriage. Instead, he pulls all his energy into enjoying Andy's adoration, even expressly reliving previous performative moments. Like when Nick wipes the snow from Andy's lips, just as he wiped the sugar dust from Amy's years ago. It's really fitting that, when carrying out his affair, Nick instinctively reverts back to cool guy, the character he is most comfortable playing. It comes more naturally than being himself, and that's a big old problem. When Amy finds out about the affair, she's furious that he's betrayed her. But even more so, she's furious that he has successfully turned her into a cliché, clingy housewife. Or, as Book Amy puts it, average dumb woman married to average man. This, you see, is a role she never wanted to play. Again, it's super easy to make this all about Nick and Amy's sublime dysfunction. But we think the film is doing something more. We think it's arguing that when someone, in the early, easy throes of romance, forces themselves into an unnatural mold, it all but dooms that relationship. It's easy to perform well in the best of times, but when a relationship is put under pressure, whether it's illness, economic insecurity, or even a fussy new baby, it's possible and even likely that said relationship might come undone. But it gets worse when both participants are, like Nick and Amy, so completely used to performing that they've become out of touch with who they really are. In this case, losing the relationship means losing yourself. Again, many of us have been there on some level. We just might not have experienced the spectacular fall that Nick and Amy do. Still, Amy's not one to watch her marriage slowly disintegrate.
I'm not a quitter.
Instead, she goes straight scorched earth. And that's when the girl goes gone. Amy's disappearance under apparently violent circumstances allow her to entirely rewrite her marital history and recast the roles. That's where her fake diary comes in. In writing it, Amy knows that the most important audience to win over is no longer Nick, but rather the police and the public. So she constructs a slightly massaged version of herself. In her telling, a sincere, loving girlfriend becomes an innocent, frightened wife who eventually writes,
This man of mine may kill me.
Then, when constructing Nick, she takes her legitimate gripes, that he's aloof and uncaring, and dramatically extrapolates, framing him as a scary, murderous husband. Now, look, dude was a distant jerk who genuinely neglected her, but he certainly doesn't seem to have been expressly violent or abusive. Most importantly, Amy's written performance draws from the very real and prevalent dynamics that truly exist in a huge number of abusive relationships, thus making her account more believable. But perhaps the most satisfying thing for Amy? After fleeing, she gets to take on a new, more powerful role, that of the missing golden girl, the American beauty and the innocent pregnant wife. This is a role that she knows will win everyone over.
And America loves pregnant women.
In what might actually be this story's most profound indictment of our societal sexism, Amy banks on this fact. There's no woman the media loves more than a disappeared white girl. Meanwhile, she has left Nick to navigate his own new role, one for which he is ill-prepared, the sad man whose wife has gone missing. Oh, and also the main suspect in her disappearance. Flailing in his part, Nick mumbles apathetically through a press conference and even gets caught smiling in a picture with a flirtatious local woman. Amy took a gamble, and she guessed right, that Nick's smug, easygoing attitude and, of course, his chin would make him the worst possible performer of this role. Revenge is sweet. No wonder Amy watches from afar in utter glee, as her underperforming husband seems to be underperforming himself right into the state penitentiary. But why not just leave him and/or egg his car? Why the whole elaborate plot? It's actually pretty fitting that Amy is unable to simply disappear and leave it at that. Instead, the ever-able actor needs to entirely rewrite her marriage and recast the roles to her liking. We'd argue that this is particularly easy for Amy, who seems to have lost sight of who she is from years of pretending to be the cool girl. Inventing and performing comes weirdly natural to her. Again, this sounds crazy, but it isn't that different from something a lot of us have done to varying degrees. That is, recasting a relationship after it fails, painting a self-preserving narrative that allows us to cope with the reality we can't accept. Once again, in the film, somewhat banal and universal behavior that happens in a lot of semi-dysfunctional relationships gets dialed up until it becomes terrifying and unrecognizable. But of course, because this is Nick and Amy done, things are only going to get more demented. Nick finds a veritable bachelor's den in his sister's woodshed, and finally connects the dots. Amy set him up. Truly petrified, Nick seeks the help of Tanner Bolt, a professional skee-ball lawyer. Bolt helps Nick shift the narrative, specifically by directing his act. He literally trains Nick to 1. Stop seeming like a smug dick, and 2. Paint himself to also be a victim. And so, Nick goes on TV and becomes the best possible sad husband whose wife has gone missing. He lies to the world about profoundly missing, loving, and fearing for Amy, and admits to being a lousy partner. And honestly, he kinda kills it.
But I don't care about that anymore. I just want to find my wife.
This is a performance for which Amy was unprepared. It's exactly this moment that we see Amy's demeanor change. Suddenly, she seems attracted to Nick. He's outperforming her for once, and it only took hours of intricate coaching. Once again, and we hate to say it, plenty of us know the feeling of performing a perfect self for our ex in hopes of winning them back, manifesting everything they wanted us to be. This kind of performance isn't necessarily rational, and it definitely isn't particularly healthy, but it's understandable. However, if you're Nick and you married Amy, your performance is also a fight for your goddamn life. So, higher stakes. That said, for most of us, such a performance usually doesn't work out in the long term. For Nick, it only seems to persuade Amy because she has so long been desperate for him to perform to her liking. And so, Amy gets into character for her performance of crime number 2, promptly seducing and killing Desi. And then, she finally comes home. In this moment, Nick and Amy perform a perfect reunion for the press, complete with a perfectly dramatic embrace which ends with Amy appearing to faint. America's beloved missing woman and sad husband instantly become America's golden couple. Of course, there's trouble in this effed up paradise. As they embrace, Nick whispers in her ear,
You f***ing bitch.
That's the first time we've seen him call Amy out in performing, or vice versa. Of course, only he knows the insane and murderous depths of her depravity. Then Nick gets to watch his wife play brave survivor in the hospital. Unlike average dumb woman married to average shitty man, this is a role she's chosen, and she milks it for all it's worth. What's more, her flawless performance ensures she won't be tried for her crime, despite Detective Boney's skepticism.
Then why did you try to buy a gun?
Understandably wary of his killer wife, Nick is not exactly down to accept her new act. He's even less stoked to commit to the chagrined, atoning husband he performs so well.
The Nick I saw on TV, that's the Nick I fell in love with.
You do know I was just telling you what you wanted to hear, right?
He threatens to leave her multiple times, but Amy sets him straight on just how dumb that would be.
Wounded, raped wife battled her way back to her husband and he deserts her. They'll destroy you.
Still, Nick insists that once the media attention fades, he's going to write himself off the Nick and Amy show. At the subsequent Welcome Home Amy PR stunt, Nick stands dutifully by as Amy delivers for the crowd, adding to the show only when she demands it and with the most minimal amount of conviction.
Kiss my cheek.
He begs his lawyer and the detective to help him prove the truth, but both decline. He's on his own. Importantly, in order for the new Nick and Amy love story to work, they necessarily must corroborate all the awful things Amy wrote about Nick.
I'm gonna need those 3 things to feel safe. You have to own this, Nick.
Amy candidly demands he play the humbled husband indefinitely, but the ambiguous line between performance and reality is about to really disappear. Near the end, Amy tells Nick that she's pregnant, though Nick hasn't touched her. Apparently, she's commandeered some old splooge sample. In this way, she's turned her unhappy, lie-fueled marriage into a real, tangible family. Furious, Nick insists that he's still going to leave, and gets violent. The idea of performing happy parenthood with the murderer is, it seems, too much for him to take. That's when Amy delivers these blistering words.
The only time you liked yourself was when you were trying to be someone this might like.
In this moment, they show each other their genuine humanity. His abusive rage and her manipulative psychopathy. Afterwards, Nick tries to reason with her.
And then all we did was resent each other and try to control each other and cause each other pain.
But she merely affirms.
That's marriage.
In front of the TV crew, Nick takes Amy's hand and seems to concede to her demands. That their marriage is an ugly performance he must partake in, even if he doesn't fully like the role he's been given. He will have to embody this persona, but he'll get to do so at Amy's side. They're agreeing to collude in deceiving the world. We see as much when Nick explains his logic to his sister Margot. He says he needs to stay around for the baby, but Margot sees something more sinister.
You want to stay.
I have a responsibility. It's not about what I want anymore.
You want to stay with her.
He can't even deny it. He and Amy have finally found a performance that each can accept. Nick shines in the TV interview, delivering the perfect act on Amy's behalf.
We're gonna be parents.
Ta-da! Their marriage is saved. So, what the f? There's something so creepy and fitting about Amy's ultimate revenge against Nick. It's perfectly corollary to the way she felt forced to perform cool girl when they first dated. She has masterfully manipulated the situation to force Nick to forever perform as someone that he's not, both with her and with the world. They have, through their love, each molded and changed one another, and we are left to presume, not for the better. As Nick reflects in both the opening and the conclusion of the film, marriage has forced each of them to become someone else.
What have we done to each other? What will we do?
Now, as we said earlier, many people leave this movie with the women be crazy shrug. But that's a pretty facile interpretation. Rather, we'd argue that this movie is saying something about all of us, about how we lie and perform in relationships, and how those performances deform our very being. Similarly, many of us recast ourselves as victims, as Amy does, and perform ourselves to perfection in the fallout of a relationship, as Nick does. But there's more. The movie seems to posit a few larger, ultimately dark things about marriage and romantic love in general. First, that happy relationships are ultimately performances in which the participants tacitly agree to put on a good show for the world, and often for each other. It's obviously true of Nick and Amy, and in some ways it's true for a lot of us. Nick and Amy, with their TV appearance, are merely the most extreme conceivable version of your average couple putting on a happy face for a party after having a huge fight. That's why it's so creepy. It takes existing relationship dynamics and just cranks them up to 11. Second, it posits that romantic relationships are often, for the participants themselves, bonds of questionable genuineness, a dance between honesty and deceit. It argues that we can never truly know if the person we're with is being themselves, or if they're merely playing a role, and that maybe we don't even want to know. No matter how close we are, we can't fully understand the nature of our partner's subjectivity, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, or what they have in store for us. What's more, it seems to argue that we kind of enjoy the performance. And if not, too bad, cause there is literally no other way. And that, Wisecrack, is why I have resigned myself to living out my golden years surrounded by cats. Kidding. Sort of. But what do you guys think? Is romantic love inherently deforming to the human character, or am I just projecting? Let us know what you think in the comments. Huge thanks to our great patrons for supporting our channel and podcast. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace.